Australian Aviation Podcast, the official podcast of Australian Aviation, unpacking the latest insights, developments and issues impacting Australia's aviation sector.
Hello and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. I am Jake Nelson, and with me, as always, or as usual, is my co-host, the deputy editor of Cyber Daily and Elvis impersonator, David Hollingworth.
Uh-huh.
See, that's why you only impersonate the impersonators.
Exactly, yes. I do it very well.
It has been a busy week in aviation, though things are starting to slow down for the end of the year. But nonetheless, we have a few things to get through today. There have been a couple of comments that I want to bring up as in terms of shout-outs. We had a comment on last week's video on YouTube at Eddie Park-Y9X said, "Hey Jake, good podcast this week. Thank you. As someone who lives in Perth, I can say that chicken treat isn't that good."
Everyone's got an opinion.
Yeah, well, look, Eddie, perhaps you might think that because you have access to chicken treat all the time. You know, it's not special for you anymore.
It's no longer a treat, you might say.
Yeah.
It's just chicken.
Yeah, exactly. But for us, you know, stranded out here in the East Coast, we have a Porto and we have KFC,
But nothing as exotic as chicken treat.
As exotic as chicken treat. No, yeah. I do like their I don't know what they call the bacon one, but it's got, you know, that
bacon chicken treat.
No, I don't know if it's like the Baconizer or something, because I know Wendy's has the Baconator, but it's I don't know if they call it the Baconator. I'm advocating for this thing, but I can't remember its name.
So good, you don't even remember its name.
Yeah, but it's got that bacon flavored mayo on it. That I think KFC's had it once or twice, but It's got, you know, bacon sauce. So
can't say no to bacon sauce.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, you can.
Well, true.
We don't live in a bacon-based dictatorship yet. We have also had some commentary on last week's podcast on YouTube. Just getting that. We were talking, of course, about Jetstar traveling to Bali and onwards to Singapore through regional airports, so places like Newcastle and the Sunshine Coast. Alex on Facebook said, it's pretty simple. Jetstar have maxed out their passenger allocations from major cities, so have to come up with creative ways of getting people to Bali. There's a Melbourne Denpasar service that starts in Cairns, a Perth Denpasar service that starts in Adelaide. Sunshine Coast can catch local and connecting passengers from Auckland, Melbourne, and Sydney. Newcastle can catch from local and connecting passengers from Melbourne and Brisbane. Denpasar to Singapore is always a popular route and connect to QF, EK, Indigo, and One World PAX, and that is true. Actually, that does make sense. The bigger airports, Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, and Perth, they do all have, for a lot of places, restrictions on how many flights can go in and out of there per day. I don't know what the arrangements are with Indonesia at the moment, but it makes sense to sort of go to try and catch more people from these smaller secondary airports if you can't get them from the larger airports. And, you know, Sunshine Coast is not that far from Brisbane. Newcastle is not that far from Sydney if you think about it.
Yeah, I've made the trip many times. It's not that far, but it's still far enough.
It's not that far, but still far enough. So, excellent observation.
Very good observation
from Alex on Facebook. But we have got a jam-packed schedule of podcasts today. I believe, David, you've got the cyber
straight
podcast
after this one.
After this one. So let us not dither and dilly and or dally for too much longer. Big news that's come out of the aviation industry over the past week, particularly in the commercial airline sector, and this was something that we probably have seen coming for a while, the ban on power banks in flight. So there have been a couple of high-profile incidents. You know, they had that fire in, I think it was July, on that Virgin Australia flight to Hobart. And I think recently we've had someone's power bank catch fire in the Melbourne Airport Qantas lounge.
Yep.
I believe I read about that. So
the initial headlines for that one were kind of wild as well. Man catches fire. I'm like, what the hell is this? Are we getting some spontaneous human combustion action happening? No, it's just his power bank exploding.
Yeah, so... Well, it's a big problem with some of these power banks. Some power banks are safer than others, but it's easier to just put a blanket ban on using them in flight than to say you can use this one and this one, but not this one or that one, right? So from the 1st of December. On Virgin flights, you will not be able to use or charge your power banks on board. As of the 15th of December, the same policy will apply on Qantas and Jetstar.
No, this is domestic or international?
This is domestic, but probably I think it would apply to international as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, on a domestic flight, unless you're hopping over to Perth, I don't think you really need to be using that power bank anyway. I mean, for heaven's sake, charge everything before you get in the aircraft, you're fine.
Well, it's my partner had was using an iPhone SE that she got in 2016, and the battery had deteriorated to the point where if she did not plug it into a power bank, it would die in about an hour.
Okay, well, I mean, that does sound a bit of a problem with the hardware.
So she did recently upgrade to the iPhone 17, and I think her battery problems have been mostly solved by that.
Yeah.
But airlines also have those in-seat charging ports now more and more. I mean, you're not going to see them on every plane, but on at least on most of the newer ones, you're going to be getting these in-seat charging ports.
So you just don't need them.
Yeah, in theory, if the charging port is working, you would not need the power bank. That said, I have been on the odd, have still been on flights on sort of older aircraft that did not have the in-seat charging. So I'm not sure if Virgin 700s over to Perth, when you fly the 700s, have those, but that would be a long flight.
On one charge,
On one charge.
Especially if you are trying to work at the same time, because that will drive your the battery in the laptop down.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can see it being bit of an issue there, but by and large, it seems like just a sensible thing to do.
The 737 MAX 8s, I think the A321 Neos that Jetstar has, the XLRs that Qantas is bringing in, the A220s, and the I think the E190 E2s that Virgin has will have them at some point.
Yeah.
But they will all have this in-seat charging, and so the power banks, which are riskier, are not going to be needed as much. We spoke to Natasha Heap, who's this aviation safety researcher at the University of Southern Queensland. The goal of having these power banks in the cabin, because you're not allowed to carry them in your checked luggage, is to not so much that it's easier to... It's not so much that the fire will not be as bad if it starts in the cabin.
It's just that you can actually access it.
You can get to the power bank in question. Yeah. So... well, if a power bank, goes into thermal runaway and, the whole thing goes up, it's really, really hard to stop it. But if it's if you can stop it before it reaches that point, or if you can, extinguish the stuff that it might have set on fire around it, that would be a much preferable.
Far better than the entire cargo bay just smoldering away beneath the aircraft.
Yeah, exactly. And it's as she said. It's one of the most dire emergencies that the crew can face in the air. She says it's not just like you can throw them out the window, right?
I mean, what that is like one of those little the garbage, the trash dumps you see in high-rise apartments. You open the thing, drop it. You need that inside of the aircraft, so you can just have this shoot. You can just bombs away.
Yeah, someone else's problem now.
Exactly.
But it's. So, she made this, a very valid point. If you're driving between Brisbane and Sydney and your phone catches fire, you just, pull the car over on the side of the road. Everyone gets out. So, there's...
It's kind of hard to do that in
a plane. And it's also why one of the big risks for these fires is if the device is damaged, right? If it's damaged, then it's easy to catch fire. So that's why they tell you on the plane, if you lose your phone in the seat, don't try to retrieve it. You might end up damaging the phone, and that could, cause a fire. Call a member of the cabin crew, and they can come and sort this out. I think they actually banned. There was few years and years ago. There were these Samsung Galaxy Note.
Oh, they were very prone to popping off. Yeah,
that caught fire, and so those were banned on planes. So you can take your power bank on holiday with you. The upshot of it all is, but you cannot use it to charge your phone during the flight, or you cannot use it to, or you cannot charge anything. Use anything to charge.
And that's the other thing. A lot of airports these days will have charging stations all over the shop. Whether it's a little wireless thing you can pop your phone on, and it'll just charge at the desk, or PowerPoints just everywhere that everybody can use. Yeah, I mean, it should be an issue to make sure everything's charged before you hop on board.
We've also there's also been comment from Peter Carter, who's the director of Carter Captain Law. He's an aviation lawyer who who said that it's unlikely that a battery fire would disable an airliner completely, but it could cause significant damage and it would put the plane out of commission for several days. So, that it may also require a diversion, which would cost the airline a lot of money, and there might be liability claims. So, it's not just... It is about safety, but it's also about, limiting the risk financially to the airlines from something like this catching fire in midair. We'd love to know, of course, what you think. Let us know. We've had this I think it's a topic of discussion on the podcast before. But what do you think of this new power bank ban? Is it a sensible move, or do you desperately need to charge your iPhone?
As opposed to a power bonk ban, which I believe happened in the Australian government a few years back.
Yes, and probably is also still in place on airlines. I don't think they take kindly to people joining the Mile High Club. Moving on to our next story. There's been quite a bit of talk about WSI over the past few weeks, particularly as it gets closer and closer to opening next year. So we've had, speaking to ABC's The Business, Simon Hickey, the CEO of Western Sydney International Airport, said that the airport should reach its intended initial capacity of around 10 million annual passengers in the early 2030s. So they're basically saying we're not going to have the airport running at full capacity on day one.
Well, again, that seems to make sense.
That seems to make
You
sense.
can't go from 0 to 100 in no time flat.
Yeah, so we're not, looking to have all of these people flying in the early 2030s, which is when we will expect to have these 10 million annual passengers. For a new airport in Australia, that will be the fastest growth they've ever seen. He said Adelaide Airport is about 10 million annual passengers at this point in time, and they've been around for over 50 years. He says, we're going to grow into this capacity. It's not going to be opening full on day one. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
But one sort of sticking point that keeps coming up is that WSI, like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, is going to be classified as a primary gateway into Australia, meaning that there will be sort of tighter restrictions, and we've spoken about this briefly before in terms of these Jetstar flights. There'll be sort of tighter restrictions under the bilateral air service agreements with a lot of these countries, like, for example, Qatar, which caused such a stink such a stink last year. There will be restrictions on the number of... So if it was considered as a secondary gateway, for example, it's basically fill your boots. You can, with a lot of these agreements, it's come in, bring as many planes in here as you like.
Yeah.
But because it's a primary gateway, there's a cap. And I think you can have a total of 28 flights per week, for example, from Qatar into Australia through these primary gateways. So it would be taking up, if Qatar wanted to fly into WSI, they would have to take flights away from somewhere else. So Simon Hickey has basically said, look, that's a matter for the federal government. We want to work with the regulators to open up more destinations. There's been as well talk of more funding being needed to bolster the connectivity at WSI.
And that's something we've talked about before.
We have. So currently there's the $16 million Western Sydney International Takeoff Fund. There's also this $12.5 million more broad New South Wales Takeoff Fund that the state government has announced over the past week or two. But, $16 million is not a huge amount of money, all things considered. And the Western Sydney Leadership Dialogue is looking for a more ambitious multi-year package. They want a longer 5-year funding guarantee. They want incentives like waived landing fees, terminal rent concessions, cooperative marketing funds, destination promotion support. This report that they put out says that these tools help reduce early-stage risk for airlines and make new routes more commercially viable. Since 2020, many Australian state governments have invested generously to attract airlines to their airports post-COVID. Queensland has invested $100 million to support Brisbane and Gold Coast. New South Wales has invested $60 million into Sydney Airport. Western Australia has spent $75 million. They said all of these airline attraction funds were matched by the private sector, meaning that the money outlaid to attract airlines to Sydney Airport, for example, was in excess of $100 million. WSI needs the resources to compete with other domestic airports. And the executive director of business, Western Sydney, David Borger, said that they need, incentives for airlines. They need a reduction in red tape. They want to transform Western Sydney into this global gateway. He said, quote here, London, New York, and Tokyo run multiple airports successfully. So can Sydney, which is a point that we've been sort of saying over and over again. The Western Sydney visitor economy is worth $4.2 billion, attracting over 500,000 international visitors a year. We should aim to grow. We should aim to grow this to 10 billion by 2035. Mm-hmm. So it's still so far, Western Sydney Airport only has the 4 airlines that are flying out of it: Qantas Link, Jetstar, Singapore Airlines, and Air New Zealand. And, one hopes that they're going to be attracting more airlines as it gets closer and closer to opening. But, people are looking at this airport and saying, why isn't even, Virgin flying there yet, for example? No one's flying there yet, but you get the picture. So it will be interesting to see how many new airlines WSI can snag as it approaches its opening date. Because, to have an airport that's, big and fancy that nobody flies to is not fantastic.
But I can't see that being an issue. I mean, if you build it, they will come, right?
If you build it, they will come is at least the hope.
Yeah.
And I think...
and look, Singapore Airlines is not a small flyer.
It's no slouch.
Yeah.
We could see a lot of low-cost carriers look to go into Western Sydney, like, people like Vietjet and Scoot. Maybe could even sort of attract Indigo, which is the Indian low-cost carrier. So it could what else? AirAsia. It could prove to be a major base for low-cost airlines, but I think that the goal is to be, a full-fledged secondary airport for Western Sydney.
Absolutely, which is exactly what Western Sydney deserves.
Yes, exactly. So I do hope that there will be more interest in and more
fingers crossed
support provided there. We are going to take a bit of a quick break, but when we come back, we'll have more of the week's news. Back in a sec. All right, welcome back. You're listening to the Australian Aviation Podcast, and I think it's about time to present the Huey Award for the month. Huey Award for Most Reliable Airline, with the picture of Huey Lewis in the news on the front. Fun fact: this trophy, no matter how many times I pick it up, does not get any lighter.
Shocking display of physics there.
Yes, I know. It really should. They should invent trophies that get lighter when you pick them up. I don't know who'd buy them, but I would. So the Huey Award for the Most Reliable Airline, the airline that will promise you will be back in time. It's been sort of an uneventful month in the world of bitrate data, which is, of course, how we present the Huey. Qantas has remained on top in terms of the major airline groups over Virgin Australia for the 5th month in a row for on-time arrivals and on-time departures. But again, Virgin continues to lead Qantas on cancellations. So 75.2% on-time arrivals and 76.8% on-time departures for Qantas and Qantas Link in October, and that is compared to 72.1% arrivals and 72.4% departures. 2.6% of Qantas flagged flights were cancelled, compared to 1.4% of Virgin services. Jetstar, which was our most reliable airline because of that, of its extremely low cancellation rate last month, did slip back a bit to 1.9%. Sort of in the middle of the pack for on-time arrivals at 73.1%. On-time departures 72%. Now, this was, for Qantas, a 4.4% higher on-time departure rate than Virgin's, and that was in a month with the end of school holidays and the NRL Grand Final. It was also 1.4% better than October last year, so 28,000 more customers departed on time. Good work, Qantas. Also, an improvement on last October's cancellation rate, and Qantas says it is trying to improve reliability and reduce the cancellations under its control. Now, Virgin has said that...
this is a really interesting point, actually.
It's still pointing to its continued low cancellation rates, which, well deserved, and saying every day in October was directly impacted by weather. There
sure was a lot of weather in that month.
There's a lot of weather all the time.
Generally.
Just every day there's weather. But this adverse weather sort of... impacted every single day in October. But Virgin says, look, we still have the lowest average cancellation rate of the major Australian airlines. We have an on-time departure performance for the year to date of almost 80%, and we schedule more daily domestic flights on average than any other major Australian airline in October. Okay, I do want to pull them up on this point.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, technically, if you count Qantas and QantasLink separately.
Technically, yeah, okay.
If you count Qantas and QantasLink separately, then yes, Virgin schedules more flights per day than either of those two airlines. But if you put Qantas and QantasLink together, as Qantas does, they fly more scheduled daily flights.
Yeah.
So it's sort of it's not an apples to apples comparison exactly. But as we said, an uneventful month. And so turning to the Bitra data, we have to give it again this month, actually, to Hinterland Aviation.
Our old friends.
Yes, our old friends and perennial Huey Award winners, Hinterland Aviation. On-time arrival rate of 92.4%, on-time departure rate 95.7%, and cancelling just 0.1% of flights during the month. Congratulations once again, Hinterland. A perennial heavy hitter in the Huey Awards.
That 0.1% of cancellations is kind of hilarious. It makes it sound like it's probably one flight that had an issue. And we're really sorry. We don't normally do this.
Yeah, I mean, they don't operate as many sectors. And
no, they don't.
We've had VARA, Virgin Australia Regional Airlines, cancel 0 flights on various months, but they don't operate as many flights nearly as many of the others. So congratulations on the Huey.
Bravo. Well
to
deserved.
Hinterland. Speaking of regional aviation, we have an update once more on the Air T-Rex deal. The
never
name
get tired.
The name that will never get old, unlike the T-Rex. So Nick Swenson, the chief executive of Air T, was speaking to Air Finance Global this month, and he basically signaled what we were expecting to happen with Rex, which is that Rex is not going to try to compete with Qantas and Virgin again. It is going to, in his exact words, stay in its lane. He said, we don't want a competitive response from anyone. We are okay as the distant third behind Qantas and Virgin Australia, upholding the long-standing reputation for serving regional Australia well. As the Rex motto goes, our heart is in the country. So no more, Quixotic tilting at the windmills or turbofan engines of Qantas and Virgin. It's going to stick to its knitting, as it were, and keep flying those regional services. Now, it was sort of brought up in this interview with Nick Swenson. You don't operate regional passenger services generally. You do commercial jet engines, you do air cargo transport, you sell ground equipment. But Swenson said, look, this is consistent with our investment thesis. Liquidating Rex would have presented a lot of risk to regional connectivity. He said Rex was looking for a long-term and reliable aviation partner. AirT is a permanent capital vehicle with a long-term horizon and decades of experience supplying parts to the global Saab 340 fleet. And that was, again, one of the major things that attracted the administrators to this, which was AirT is swimming in parts for the Saab 340s, and they have promised to bring back around 13 of Rex's aircraft back into service by mid-2027, so going from 31 as it is today to 44. Another thing, actually, is that they are looking to keep the current management team of Rex in place.
They said, we knew they were solid and professional. They're staying in place. We are focused on bringing back classic Rex.
Classic
Rex. Oh, I like the sound of that. But
that's classic Rex.
I love this, though. The management team buckled down and guided the company through the crisis. They're the unsung heroes of the story. That's quite nice.
Yeah. Classic Rex. It's what you'd say if your friend Rex. Just
classic Rex.
Classic Rex. If
what
you down 3 tinnies and rode on top of the ute. Right, classic Rex. So that is the latest update on Rex. Rex is done trying to compete with Qantas and Virgin, presumably still competing with QantasLink on these regional routes, but not pushing back into the capitals. Now, on the subject of regional aviation, there has been sort of an increasing clamour from regional cities in New South Wales. In this alliance called Regional Cities New South Wales, they want to see a cap on regional airfares, which is similar to schemes that states that like Western Australia have, and I think there's one in Queensland on some routes as well. So these schemes subsidize effectively the airfares so that the customer will never be paying more for the airfare than such and such an amount, right?
It's socialism. Sorry, I had to get that out there. Hanging out with Steve way too much.
Well, it's, there you go, Brian. So Aviation said RCNSW Chair Councillor Steve Krieg is essential for our businesses, tourism and emergency services. Our airports face high maintenance and compliance costs despite lower passenger numbers. Mobility around the regions has slowed as airfares have risen over the past 6 years. He said, accessible regional flights are critical not only to the prosperity of our regional cities, but to their survival. Regional cities are not asking for special treatment. We are asking for fair investment to match our role in growing New South Wales and to help our cities to be the best that they can be. So they went to the New South Wales government. They sent a delegation to talk about this and to talk about some other issues like housing and water security, but who cares about those? So they sent a New South Wales delegation. There was also the Regional Capitals Australia visit to Parliament House in Canberra early this month to meet with decision makers. And that was after the terms of reference were released into the Productivity Commission and the Senate Committee inquiries around regional aviation. Councillor Kevin Mack, who is the acting chair of Regional Capitals Australia, said that the collapse of Bonza and the voluntary administration of Rex, and this is a quote, exposed the vulnerability of regional aviation routes and heightened anxiety for everyone who depends on reliable air services. So, he says that the current attention on regional aviation is welcome, especially this whole thing about the Rex voluntary administration. It says it shows the importance, shows the federal government understands the importance of regional air services in regional, rural, and remote Australia. RCA wants to partner with the federal government to ensure regional airports are financially viable and sustainable, and that Australians living beyond the state capitals are able to travel by air. He also said the vast majority of Australia's regional airports face significant financial strain. Around 60% operate at a loss. Nearly 40% expect ongoing deficits due mainly to aging infrastructure, high security costs, and disproportionate regulations.
That's an alarming set of figures.
That is an alarming set of figures.
So Western Australia has a scheme like this, doesn't it?
Yes, the Regional Airfare Zone Cap scheme. So the WA government has said that the scheme will be extended. It's supposed to expire in June 2026. But what it is it's run by the WA government in partnership with Air North, Nexus, Qantas, Rex, Skippers, and Virgin. Yeah. And it caps these regional fares to and from Perth at either $199 or $299. And this is to a number of destinations around the state.
So it's basically two bands of travel.
Yeah. So
which makes sense. I mean, WA is big.
And the airlines will, and the government will pay part of the difference in fares to the airlines. So if a fare would be $500, the government will kick in some of that $300 to bring it back down to $199. The exact amount's commercial in confidence. Most of this in its first year, by the way, 2022-23 went to Qantas, which operated at the time around 65% of regional flights in Western Australia. So that's the Regional Airfare Zone Cap scheme over in WA.
And it's clearly not bankrupted the state.
No, it hasn't.
Mind you, it's a very wealthy state. It
is a very wealthy state, but it's flown more than 500,000 discounted airfares since it was implemented in 2022. So...
that seems a reasonable ask.
It seems a reasonable ask. And, I ask this to people who live in regional WA because we're here in New South Wales and we don't have access to capped regional airfares or chicken treat. But what do you think of the Regional Airfare Zone Cap scheme? Has it helped you if you're out there listening in Broome or Karratha or Port Hedland or any of these destinations? So that is a bit of update on regional aviation. We are going to take one more quick break and we'll be right back after this. All right, welcome back. You're listening to the Australian Aviation Podcast. Now, this is a couple of stories, just a couple of quick ones. This first one, I apologize, David was not on the list, but we put it up yesterday.
Look it up.
Gotta keep you on your toes. We've had a rare sight nowadays for Australian plane spotters in Brisbane and Canberra. A passenger configured 747-400.
What the hell?
Yes, you don't see those a lot anymore in Australia. But this plane was an Air China 747-400. B2472 was the rego. And that visited Brisbane and Canberra on basically an official visit.
Right.
So the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of the People's Republic of China.
Yes.
And you had a story about this matter, didn't you?
Yeah.
But he came to Australia on a parliamentary visit on board this 747-400.
Right.
It flew to first. He flew first to New Zealand, then he came over to Brisbane. That touched down on Saturday, flew to Canberra on Monday, and then flew out of the country.
So
yesterday.
is this a commercial jet, or it's
a commercial jet? So probably the government has chartered, or I think Air China is state owned. So
I think so. Yeah.
So the government has sort of brought this aircraft down into Australia, we see 747 freighters still, Singapore Cargo and other carriers like that still fly them, but you don't see many passenger 747s anymore in Australia. Qantas got rid of its last 747 5 years ago in July 2020, and that was VHOEJ Winala Dreaming. I think they've sort of been gradually disappearing. I mean, the biggest aircraft that you'll see for passengers is the A380, which of course is bigger than the 747. And the A380 was meant to directly compete with the 747. But A380s you will still see, and I think Brisbane actually got like 3 A380s at the same time due to, I think, weather diversions. So 2 Qantas and an Emirates, which was another arresting sight. But this Air China 747, there's only 4 airlines that are still flying passenger 747s. And that's Air China, Lufthansa, Korean Air, and Rossiya, which is a subsidiary of Aeroflot. Aeroflot.
Aeroflot, yeah.
The Russian one. But remarkably, I think there are still more variants of the 747 that's cargo and passenger in service in the world than there are A380s. And the 747 has, been on its way out for a while. But you actually did a story as well on this.
So this isn't aviation related, but it is in my wheelhouse, and it's kind of funny.
Listen to the Cyber Daily podcast.
Yeah, please, because we'll be talking about it in depth on that one. But anyway, so there was a directive handed out to occupants of Parliament House to turn off Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on their devices while this guy was visiting. And it's like, what? Are they expecting him to just be walking around Parliament House randomly hacking phones? Apparently, yes, it's exactly what they expect.
I didn't know he had it in him. He doesn't look like the kind of guy.
I know, right? Maybe it's where the aircraft is full of, sensitive hacking equipment.
Possibly.
Yeah.
No, just like this guy in a very official suit, just walking around this Parliament House and then ducking into a room and pulling a pair of earbuds out and plugging a USB
I'm
stick.
in.
Yeah. If you were in Brisbane or Canberra, over the past few days, you might have seen this 747-400.
You may have been hacked.
You may have been hacked by this 747-400. We don't know.
Who knows?
I mean, and it'd be good to get more 747s back in Australia's skies, I think.
If you say so, I back it.
Yeah, we love 747s. It's the most iconic, passenger aircraft ever built.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, and Korean Air still flies them. Hey, Korean Air China, if you're looking to bring more passengers into Australia, we'd love to see more 747.
Yeah.
Lufthansa, what are you up to, right? Surely you've got some to spare to send down here.
Yeah.
You've got so many of the buggers. But yes, so that is the first of the stories. Now, this next one is one that we didn't cover, but thought it'd be an interesting discussion point. This was in The Guardian.
The
Grawny ad. So The Guardian had this story about this only tangentially related to aviation, but Flixbus. This coach service that charging as little as like $10, and you're saying not your everyday fares, right? These are I think early bird or first come first serve, whatever. But this European coach company charging fares under $10 between Sydney, Melbourne, and Canberra. It's this budget travel brand, obviously.
Coaches are already pretty budget when it comes to comfort and everything else. So going more budget is honestly, and I used to do the Sydney-Canberra trip on a bus a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Going more budget is frankly a little alarming.
Yeah. Well, look, on each coach, there's only a couple of these $9.99 fares.
Right.
It's sort of a promotional thing. They go up to about $40 to Canberra, $60 to Melbourne.
Right.
Subject to dynamic pricing. The idea is, according to Yvonne Lefranc-Morin,
you enjoyed saying that one, I can tell.
The Frenchest name I've heard in a while. Hello, Emily, if you're listening.
Yep.
But according to Yvonne Lefranc-Morin, the head of Flix's Australian operations, presumably as he had a mojito, the idea is not to run empty coaches, obviously not. They want to basically pack out as many seats as possible in these buses. So, sell a whole bunch of cheap seats, and then they can afford to bring the best possible prices. So, airfares between Melbourne and Sydney do kind of verge on the ridiculous sometimes.
Yeah.
And, Canberra and Sydney. So, according to Bitra data cited by The Guardian, return airfare Sydney to Melbourne, nearly $200 in October, $300 in the summer peak. And, tickets from Canberra, $400 return to Melbourne, $500 return to Sydney in October, which strikes me as silly because Sydney is closer.
I know, right? That's just,
But, the alternative is, do you hop in your car and drive, or do you take the train, or do you take one of these coaches?
I took the train down to Canberra recently, and that's a fine trip. It's an hour longer, but not a bad trip at all.
Canberra Station's sort of out of the way, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. Like, it's practically surrounded by bush.
Yeah.
Mind you, all of Canberra is like that. But there's a regular bus that runs from the station into Civic. That's easy to catch. I would actually rate train to Canberra as a great way to get there. Because flying is fine, but it's a lot of money to spend in half an hour in the air.
I mean, if you're flying from Sydney to Canberra, it's going to be on, a turboprop. And as I've
one
said,
of those noisy Saabs.
As I've said several times, if you've never flown into Canberra on a windy morning in a Saab 340, good.
Yeah, it's an experience.
Yeah, but so about 3.5 hours to Canberra on a Flix coach or another coach or a Greyhound, 4 hours and change on a train, 3 hours by car, an hour by plane.
Yeah.
And you can, as little as $10 on Flix, about $40 on a train.
Yep.
Sort of climbing up to around $40 on coaches. About $50 for a fuel tank for a tank of fuel that'll take you to Canberra in a car.
Yep.
$200 Sydney to Canberra on a plane. Meanwhile, for Melbourne, about $60 to $70 on the coach, $99 on the train. It'll cost you $150 to drive there in the car. This is based on $1.80 a litre petrol. And about $119, and this is all as at the cheapest trip on the 1st of December from Sydney to Melbourne. But of course, a plane will get you there in an hour and a half. A car will take 9 hours, and one of these coaches can take up to 12 hours to get from Sydney to Melbourne.
There are ways to travel to Melbourne by coach is not one of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, when we got stranded in Melbourne last year, we were considering coaches.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we just sprung for a couple of extra nights in a hotel room.
I think that's the best response to that one. Yeah. I love this, though, on the Flixbus Australia website, flixbus.com.au. They clearly have some copy from their global website. So from here in Australia, you can choose your bus route from over 400,000 daily bus connections to more than 3,000 popular European destinations.
Wow, by bus!
Sydney to Europe by bus! How exciting!
That it'll bankrupt the aviation industry. Why is nobody talking about this?
This is a bus driving onto a giant car ferry and sailing to Europe.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah, but look, they are bringing more coach services into Sydney and into Australia. So Melbourne and Sydney previously saw 2 coaches and 2 trains a day each way, according to The Guardian. That's now another 2 coach services per day now that Flix is arrived. Also nearly doubling the number of coaches between Canberra and Sydney, adding a dozen trips, including overnight services. And you can't fly from Sydney to Canberra overnight because of the curfew. Though that may change when Western Sydney opens up.
Hadn't thought of that.
So yeah, I mean, would you? You've taken coaches from Sydney to Canberra in the past.
Yeah.
Was that tolerable enough?
It's tolerable enough. Honestly, having now done the train, I think I'd rather do the train, although you only get that one service.
Yeah.
And so you're getting in at like 10 o'clock in the evening. Getting a coach down is great because it just drops you at Jolimont bus terminal, so you can get cabs, other buses from there. It's right outside the light rail.
How central is that, the Jolimont bus terminal?
Very central.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Highly, highly central. Like it's basically right in Civic.
Yeah.
And it's right at the end of the light rail, which will soon extend further south into Canberra as well. So yeah, it's a great way to get to Canberra.
It's also closer than the airport.
My favourite part of the trip is the drive past Lake George. That's gorgeous.
Going past Lake George is always wonderful.
Yeah.
So also, not to put too fine a point on it, the Jolimont bus terminal, more central than Canberra Airport.
Yes.
If you want to get into the centre of Canberra cheap, and you
$10 flicks.
Yeah, $10 flicks bus.
Yeah.
And you don't mind having to take the light rail and buses and stuff around Canberra. It seems like a decent way to go. The last story that I wanted to touch on, again, was not reported on by us because it's not directly Australia related. But I wanted to cover this because, look, you've heard of carriers misplacing bookings. You've heard of carriers misplacing luggage. But Air India managed to, for more than a decade, I think, misplace an entire plane.
I'm sorry, how?
So, okay, this plane was retired. It's a 737-200. And the rego, by the way, which I love, is VTEHH. So, it's whose plane is what plane is that? Yeah. So this plane was retired back in 2012. It had been flying at freight services for India Post, and they stored it in a remote parking bay at Kolkata Airport. And there it sat for like 13 years. And Air India was privatized 3 years ago, and sort of must have got lost in the shuffle, the ownership documents or whatever, because it just sat there. It sat there at this remote parking bay until someone at Kolkata Airport,
just like the tires slowly deflating, dust gathering on its wings.
So I think it was not included in the asset records that were transferred to Tata Group.
Like to buy a free plane, mate.
Yeah. It got lost in the shuffle. It was not included in the list of the assets that Air India had. Yeah. And so someone from Kolkata Airport must have noticed that this plane had been sitting in that parking bay for 13 years, rung up Air India and go, hey, could you pick up your plane?
But also, like, what changes day to day? One day you're looking at the aircraft that's always been there and you figure, look, I guess someone knows what it's doing. And then the next day you go, you know what? I want to know what that train's doing.
Yeah.
Train, bus, plane, thing.
Train, plane, automobile.
That mode of transport sitting over there with all that dust and the flat tires.
Yeah. And there's pictures of it sitting there in Kolkata, rusting away and half overgrown.
I like when you see a car parked on the street for a while and it's got all those leaves around its tires from the last couple of
you've got the council sticker on the window saying we're going to take possession of this car if you don't move it.
Or someone's done, please wash me in the dust that's gathered over the cockpit.
Yeah,
windows.
People are using, learner drivers are using it to practice their reverse parking, right? Because
just sitting there is so sad.
Yeah, and so this.
I don't know why I'm anthropomorphizing the plane so much, but I am.
Yeah, and Air India has confirmed that yes, they do own that plane, and they I think have sold it to whom I don't know. But
it's going to be one hell of a fixer-upper.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there was another plane that they sold not too long ago that got turned into a cafe or something.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so like an aviation-themed cafe. Actually, is it the one with the... Am I thinking of the correct rego number? VTEGG. VT Egg, I think, has been turned into a cafe. Which is amazing, frankly.
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't. Which plane is that out on the? Which plane is out on the tarmac?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
And which plane are we turning into a cafe? Egg.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
So there you go.
That's wild. How do you lose a plane? Well, there you go.
You forget to cherish it.
Yeah.
That is about all the time we have on the Australian Aviation Podcast today. Good note to end it on, I think. We've got the Cyber Podcast recording shortly after this. So I mean, hey, if you're into cybersecurity issues, check out David and Bethany, who will be appearing on the Cyber Daily Podcast. But in the meantime, from Australian Aviation, from me and David, that's all from us this week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.